A Sunday in the Canadian Rockies, a land where sublimity excites new awe for the infinite. On a 3 weeks' journey to this point through the West, and now far into the Canadian Northwest, I have by accident spent 3 successive Sundays at that number of marvelous sights of natural scenery, the most marvelous withal on this whole western continent. The first in the Yellowstone Park, the second at the Grand Canyon in Arizona, and the third today at Banff in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. In that order, these 3 points have been progressive. It is in this course that this journey should always be taken, for here is culmination certainly of all one comes to see, this mighty serried and serrated circle of the Selkirks. With the possible exception of the Himalayas alone, here is mountain scenery unmatched upon this globe. Like the Grand Canyon, because of its depth and its distance, these mountains, because of their height, but still more because of their even wider extent, simply cannot be described. The region is too large, its charm is much too manifold. The stretch of it one sees alone from the rail route extends from this point for 500 miles west toward the sea, 1,000 miles to the south, and 400 more indefinitely to the north. It is a region as vast as 20 Switzerlands rolled into one. So vast it is that it takes 2 days and a night even to ride through it on an express train. So long one travels that there literally come to see commonplace, on that surfeiting journey, 1,000 sights, any one of which would be visited as a spectacle by itself, if it had chanced to be located in some eastern one of the United States. At this particular point, the point at which Banff marks the center of a district, it seems as though all the vicinity's charms come to one gorgeous climax. If by any possibility the scene could be depicted by the pen, what the reader would see would be: yonder to the north, a huge mass, Cascade Mountain, 9,800 feet high, and, as due south, 3 other mountains, Rundell, Sulphur, and Tunnel Mountains, rising 7.5, 8.5, and 9,500 feet to the sky, while off directly to the east is Mount Inglismaldy, and westward, although 20 miles away, still in plain view, Assiniboine, the Matterhorn of the New World. If in this region at any point, in any direction you lift your eyes, at any hour of the day, and for that matter, because of the high altitude and northern latitude, far into the summer night, you will see only mountains, mountains, mountains. There are mountains seemingly so near that you could reach a hand and touch them, mountains so far away that streams of water flowing down their sides look insignificant as narrow bands of ribbon, mountains so vast that avalanches coursing down them cut out dead trees from the forest as easily as would a gardener pluck weeds out of a flower bed, mountains so high that clouds which would look far off elsewhere are at home less than halfway up their summits, while, running through all and above all, there are gloomy gorges and tremendous cliffs. There are peaks thrust to the skyline and snowfields that glitter in the sun like lakes of silver. There are pine forests of somber green and fleecy clouds as white as snow, and, strange deception, even as you look, summits and forests and snowfields and clouds all blend together into one weird mass of beauty. As you gaze upon it, the entire region seems to move, and to move upward. The whole mass recedes, unfolding farther and still farther, upward and forever upward, until you come to think real the fabled possibility of piling mountain upon mountain, as the Titans erst heaved Pelion on Ossa and Ossa on Olympus, scaling the high seat of Jove. I had not thought of it, but speaking of Jove is appropriate on Sunday, and both are appropriate here, for of all places for meditation, this is such a place par excellence. Of all the sermons, too, in nature's repertoire, here is a pulpit for preaching a most eloquent one. To one who stands here and looks upon a scene like that which unfolds yonder, thoughts of great moment cannot help but break upon him. Of such thoughts there may be as many as there are kinds of people, but at least one of them comes to me in the words of the ancient, antiquated passage: "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. One who stands in this location enters willy-nilly into that old writer's mood. I do not know who the ancient poet, peasant singer was, but I do know what was his frame of mind. He was halfway pagan and half pietist. I know also this: he was a man of serious mien, he was a man in trouble, and his language was the language of a great resolve. Furthermore, I know that his resolve was a perfectly natural one. It was natural in at least two particulars. First, to wing his aspiration upward, and secondly, to turn his gaze when he lifted it up to the hills as his objective. The objective is full as normal as the action. To the hills, the higher the more fascinating. That man, puny, primitive, pitiful perhaps, went in quest of divinity, and divinity then, as now, as always, when personified, was localized upon the hilltops. For example, when altars were first builded, they were always upon high places. When a law was given, its descent from heaven was traced to Mount Sinai. For some reason there is still something especially compelling and constraining upon man's emotion when they are in presence of great mountains. There is something which compels men, elsewhere flippant, in that presence to become sober, earnest, reverent, beyond their wont. For strange reason, when upon the top of a hill, they still feel, with childish naivete, nearer heaven, and when at a mountain's base, in contemplation of it, they feel farther off and have more longing for it than when elsewhere. It states a veritable commonplace to say that physical strength is gained, or rather regained, in these mountain regions. The forces of nature here do seem to be so wanton in their exercise of strength and prowess that one feels himself catch somewhat of this power by mere contagion. In these spaces, too, so wide and open, one seems to breathe in a fresh store of vitality and to draw in new aliment from very unpeopled immensity. The scene itself is peaceful also. It is so reposeful that in sight of it great loads of care ought to drop from tired shoulders, and a man returned to this extent to nature ought to spring aloft and feel himself standing as straight as one of those tall, stalwart pines upon the mountain sides. But all this is not to the point. It is good statement of fact, but it is not in the line of this logic. For this is not the kind of help that we set out in search of. No one sets out with a scene like this for contemplation, with a theme like that for cogitation. There is such a thing as physical strength, but there is also another kind, soul power. Who was speaking of the rate of pulse beats? Our theme was lightness of heart. It was not regularity of respiration, but intensity of aspiration. Everybody knows the difference. Everybody knows also the longing for this second. More than this, they know as well that from this kind of pain, beauty of scenery alone cannot bring coveted relief. For example, there are few finer things in all literature than Burke's Essay on the Sublime and the Beautiful. In it he considers the great mountains of the earth one by one. He points out that in the fact that they are capped with snow and decked with sunshine there is beauty. But what of it? Is not Niagara sublime? And yet Niagara has been a favorite place to commit suicide. Is not Greece the land of world-famed beauty? And yet Byron dragged a bleeding heart halfway across the continent of Europe to escape the pain he felt there. A sense of power and physical strength do emanate from proximity to great mountains, but not so of itself a sense of joy or of relief to one in sadness. For that deeper pain the surface facts produce no help. By the test of failure, then, we are driven back to ask whether there be or not anything back of these. For answer, I look long at yonder mountain. As the light plays on it, I give my imagination full play with it. As I sit and look long, I can see those rocks, in fancy frame themselves in any shape I will. I sit and wait and watch the while the parts of its bold surface mold themselves into features, aye, the features of a face. And, as I list, I hear a voice speak to my inner musings from those lips of stone. It only speaks to inner ears, but to my inner consciousness it does speak. And it says, what is its message? It is possible to pick out three essentials, like three tones or overtones of one great harmony, for there are that number of things that characterize every hill, every high place, every mountain. They are its size, its age, and its silence. These suggest, and in this order, the three faculties to which the mountain thus personified so speaks, namely, the mind, the heart, and the soul, if I happen to have one of each. Huge size bespeaks the greatness of a great creator. The thought of long enduring age begets complacency. It does this by suggesting a long enough perspective in viewing incidents in their relation to each other to make the reasons for their occurrence more nearly plainly apparent. Patient silence breathes peace into the soul and in a way all of its own. The three facts thus established, and in cumulative order, are: first, that God is; secondly, that he is powerful enough to help; but thirdly, that he helps in ways that may be understood only by taking a large enough view of life as a whole. Of course we know, when we reason it out, that size here means nothing. Of course we know that Nature speaks truly when she says, "He that knoweth the least of my secrets is master of all that I am." Of course the poet was right when he said, "Little flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the cranny and hold you here in my hand. Little flower, if I could know what thou art, root and branch and all, I should know what God and man are." Of course we know this when we fall back upon reason. But men do not all, or any of them always, do this. The logic of intuition upon which they act as well as feel is that everything they see that is greater than something they have seen before gives them a greater impression of its maker than they have yet had before. Here is the fallacy that inheres in the claim of materialism. The moment matter becomes so big in its bulk as to be obtrusive, the thought of its bigness is the one thought that becomes the most intrusive. To put the matter in technical phrase, as Professor Picton in his Religion of the Universe remarks, materialism has never been anything but a morbid concomitant of the wonder excited from time to time by fresh glimpses into the maze of natural phenomena. To put it in popular phrase, back of all phenomena there is a source of phenomena, call it whom or what you will. To sum up the substance of both phrases, the greater is the thing we see, the greater its maker comes to seem. And of such things as these, the builder and maker is God. The second thing I notice is that mountains age. It is a familiar form of exaggeration to say of a thing, it is as old as the hills. Of course, in reality, it is not. Nothing else is so old. Such masses of material were the first to shape themselves in the process of Earth's evolution. It is difficult to make real to one who has not seen them the appearance of great age these mountains have. And it is still more difficult to make real the consequent air of repose that this gives them. There they stand, and there they have stood, year by year, through century on century, and through change of age and era and epoch and eon, they have stood so constant, massive, and majestic. The message of their calm complacency is this: in times of trouble, distress, and perplexity, one must look for explanation, not at passing, fitful, and ephemeral things, but farther. This may be a hard lesson to learn, and the length of one lifetime may seem all too short a period in which to learn it. Nevertheless, before one can have peace of mind, it must be learned. The third and last thing that I notice about those great monster mountains is their silence. They stand so silent that speech in description of them seems a profanation. Those far off heights, unpeopled, unwooded even, but rock mounted and snow covered, lie, whether in heat or in cold, whether in sunlight or shade, always still, always quiet, in a ghost-like, wraith-like silence. Over all, there is a sort of moving stillness, a kind of vocal silence. But to one who listens in alert imagination, that very silence becomes vocal, that very stillness becomes articulate. And, to the soul within, a soul somewhere without one speaks, and speaking thus, it says, "Having once withstood the shock of our own creation, we can now look unmoved upon anything. This is a suggestion of the eternal fact that there has been tragedy in the very fact of creation itself, that there is sensitiveness, even suffering, throughout the universe, and that this suffering extends, in the form of eternal longing, of perpetual solicitude, to the very heart, the anxious heart, of the Almighty God Himself. End of A Sunday Afternoon in the Rockies by David McConnell Steele. This recording is in the public domain.